We're joined by the Tánaiste and Fianna Fáil leader, Micheál Martin. Tánaiste, thank you indeed for joining us this morning. Can I start by asking you about comments made by Ian Bailey's solicitor, Frank Buttimer? He described as feral and extraordinary your comments last week that Bailey should have been tried for the murder of Sophie Toscan du Plantier. It was a direct criticism of the DPP's decision. It was a direct criticism of the courts for not extraditing Ian Bailey. It was, as Buttimer put it, an attack on the pillars of justice of the state. Why did you choose to make those extraordinary comments last week?
Well, I think those remarks are over the top completely, in my view, and an overreaction. And I think there's something absurd in the criticism of my remarks. Are people really suggesting that 25 years after a brutal murder of someone who had come to love this country, that we're not entitled to reflect and to analyse and ask ourselves serious questions in respect of our criminal justice system?
Did you not go further than that, though? I mean, did you not go
No,
further than that? Was it not, at the very least, an implicit criticism of the DPP, which the DPP took the decision based on the evidence that he saw at the time not to prosecute? You seem to criticise the courts for not extraditing him to a case that anyone who covered the case in Paris said it wasn't remotely anything close to a fair trial.
Shane, I think the entirety, if you read the entire speech from beginning to end, it is a very serious criticism of the failure of our state really to do justice by Sophie Toscan du Plantier, and also in terms of by her family. And sometimes I'm making the point that we have this sort of superiority complex in respect of our criminal justice system, which we need to question. And I don't make any apologies for the statement I made. Because I read Senator Maloney's book and I give him credit for the extraordinary work he put into this. The idea that there are areas within our justice system that we can't comment on at all, even after the person is dead and after 25 years, I think there's an absurdity there. And I've watched this over the years, Shane, in relation to our attitude to European justice directives and so on, where there's always been a tendency, or there was historically, to opt out, and we citing our common law jurisdiction. And I think there's an element of that. And this sort of defensiveness, I don't think serves the country well, particularly long after the cases.
You don't think it implied that you know better than the lawyers in the DPP who made the decision not to prosecute?
No one in life is beyond questions. There seems to be a suggestion that our system, even 25 years on, is beyond reproach or can't be criticised. I don't accept that. I think that's a false premise. And I think some of the commentary, although a lot of people would agree with what I said, and the audience that evening were particularly in agreement, that many of them were journalists and obviously different people from different areas of life who attended. But the reality is our system did fail Sophie du Plantier and failed her family. We need to ask questions.
Okay.
And I mean, if you look also, if I could make the point, Shane, look at what happened in the immediate aftermath of the rioting in Britain. The severest of rioting that we had witnessed. And Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, who you'd hardly think are, far-right hardliners, they had people in jail within a week. Our system is far slower in terms of dealing with events of that kind.
Nobody has been found guilty in relation to the Dublin riots, and we're now 8-9 months after.
Yeah.
But
I think some people may have come forward for public order, but I take what you're saying there. But I think and it's not just the Dublin riots. There have been other events, and again, you just see people trotting up to the courts. They'll get bail, and they'll be told come back in 2 months' time for the hearing. Justice is not just about law alone. And I know some commented on it, might comment about high principles of law. I mean, there was a time in Ireland when people sort of made a virtue out of getting people off on technicalities, for example, legal technicalities. Whereas I think justice must always be at the core of how we administer the law and how we make sure that victims in particular, Shane, because I think victims, and I've met people recently again, families whose loved ones have been murdered and killed, from the whole. I mean,
I have that. We have that point, and I don't want to get too bogged down in this, but I just want to come back to the Dublin riots. Do you think the wheels of justice have been far too slow in relation to bringing those responsible for justice?
I certainly do. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Can I ask you about the? I'm not going to ask you when the election is going to be because you've been pretty categoric about that. And sometimes I think we have to accept politicians' bona fides. And if they say it's going to be in a certain date, well, maybe it is going to be in a certain date. But can I ask you, what if Simon Harris comes to you and says, "Actually, Micheál, I've reconsidered. I want to have an election before Christmas." Would you reconsider in that eventuality, in that
I
scenario?
was just about to say that you're a rarity in the media world for not asking the question, and then you go on and ask the question in a direct way. um,
Perhaps,
I,
guilty as charged,
but
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 it is
I
a
think
reasonable. That is a
but
reasonable scenario. I accept your bona fides. I do accept them, and I think when you said you weren't going to go into government with Sinn
yeah,
Féin, people didn't accept it, and you stood to that. But that is a scenario.
yeah.
Me, Fine Gael may change their mind and may say, actually, we should go.
Yeah, to be fair, the Taoiseach has said in advance of any decision, he will consult with the party leaders in government. Although it is the prerogative of the Taoiseach, we are in a coalition government, and I expect consultations if there was to be a change.
Mm.
I would make the point, though, just standing back from it. I mean, it's now coming to the end of September. We have a budget on the 1st of October. We have to get a Finance Act through, a lot of taxation changes, investment in housing and in health, and the cost of living will be uppermost, right? So then you have got to do a social protection bill as well to bring in measures to help people to cope with the
Yeah,
cost of living.
it's all
So
doable. If you want to have an
is it
election,
though?
Tánaiste,
But
you
Shane,
can.
I wouldn't underestimate the logistical challenge in doing all of that. And then we have mental health bill, defamation bill, and so forth. And in
Okay,
any event,
okay. No,
but
no,
let's take
that's reasonable. No, that's but
if you take November.
with
But are we all
respect,
getting?
honestly, you accused me of asking a question I wasn't supposed to ask, or I was pretending not to ask.
Oh, well, I'm just making a light comment.
No, it's a fair criticism. I'm not taking exception to it. But you didn't really answer my question. If Fine Gael came, if Simon Harris came and said, actually, you know what, I think we should go before Christmas, is it something you would consider in that scenario?
Well, again, if he was to come, we'd obviously discuss it. I'm just was going to make the point here. There's nothing in it. Like, I mean, November, you've got December, January, and you've February. It
Sure.
would seem to me you'd have to have it in February, logistically. I think the Constitution takes us to March. But if you're having a 4-week campaign, so I don't know what everybody's getting excited about, to be honest.
Okay, let's talk about the budget. I know you're not going to tell us what's in it, but just obviously people will be interested, our listeners will be interested in a lot of potential measures. Energy credits, can we expect more energy credits in the budget?
I think energy is a big cost item on households and indeed on businesses as well. So I think you can expect some movement on that. The precise specifics of it have not yet been agreed
Paid out
or brought to a
this year?
conclusion. It will be this year. Yeah, I think most, if not all, of the cost of living package will be allocated this year from the surplus that will come by the end of the year, and there will be a substantial surplus in
Okay.
our figures this year. So the cost of living package will be designed to try and get people over the winter and to deal with energy costs and other costs as well. I would point out that we've substantially reduced costs in education in terms of school transport, free school books, up to junior certificate, and we've alleviated school examination fees over the last number of years, the pressure on that. In health, we've brought the drug threshold payment scheme down to €80. We've eliminated inpatient hospital charges. We have free HRT now being brought forward by the Minister, Stephen Donnelly. Free IVF, we need to ensure there's more resources into the future for that, which I think has been groundbreaking. Okay. Free contraception up to 35 years of age. So we've reduced costs. Public transport has come down. And that's been a focus of this government over the last 2 years, to try and reduce the cost of public services, to give people a break and to give workers in particular a break.